Welcome to Home Sweet Home.
First down, say!
A New Orleans Saints podcast presented by Caesars New Orleans.
Hakeem drops the ball! Hakeem drops the ball! Brian Milne might have fallen on it at the 10-yard line!
You gotta be kidding me!
It is the New Orleans Saints football! There is a God after all!
Join us as we celebrate 50 years of cheers, tears, and celebrations we'll never forget on our home turf.
Look out, right through! A pick block by Steve Gleason. It is scooped and scored by Curtis DeLoach. Touchdown, New Orleans!
Hear from the players that made those unforgettable moments and those who were there to tell the story.
Snap, placement, kick by Hartley, and it is good! It's good! It's good! Pigs have flown. Hell is frozen over. The Saints are on their way to the Super Bowl.
Taking us on this half-century journey are your hosts, John DeShazier and Gus Cattingill.
The Saints win!
Welcome to Home Sweet Home, a New Orleans Saints podcast presented by Caesars New Orleans. John DeShazier, NewOrleansSaints.com, and Gus Cattingill with you. We count down 10 of the greatest games, not the greatest, but of the greatest games that have taken place over on Poydras inside the Caesars Superdome. Well, John, you can't get to 50 years of celebrating the Dome being a home if you don't have it as your home. So this episode, about the first game in the Superdome way back when in 1975, August 6th, the preseason game, and of course a little bit later, the regular season opener. What do you recall about everything going into that moment, man, where you see the cranes, you see the construction, people are probably driving around town going, what is that going to look like? And there it is. It's finally open, and you're moving from uptown New Orleans to downtown New Orleans.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is you're talking about a crown jewel facility. Dave Dixon, father of the Superdome, and all those people who had that vision came up with a facility that was multi-purpose, but that ends up, the vision to see a place where you can play football and have a team in there now 50 years is pretty phenomenal. And again, to be a multi-use facility is pretty phenomenal when you put the vision to that. But it's a crown jewel facility. You're thinking about it, and you think about New Orleans. Okay, where are you going to put this thing? What is it going to look like? How do you put the structure in? How do you make it fit? And so to, again, have that vision, and at that time, you construct it, and there are few, if any, facilities like that. And I think they call the Astrodome the eighth wonder of the world at some point? And then they might have called the Kingdome that at one point. Pooh. The Superdome really was that facility, because the Superdome is one of those that still remains and still is in full use and still not just functional, but breathing, a living body for New Orleans. And so, that thing, man, it's crazy. I remember I grew up in Georgia, and I remember, you'd see games, you see the Falcons play the Saints in the Superdome, and of course, the pregame shots that they're showing the Superdome, the outside, and it's like, man, Falcons don't have something like that. And it doesn't matter who's playing them, because just about everybody in the NFL had an outdoor facility.
Yeah.
So nobody really has that. And so you're looking at that and you're saying, they can play football in there? Mm-hmm. And so you really, as a kid, you look at it and you say, how can you put a football field inside and have enough room for everything to happen in there? Mm-hmm. And so it's really bigger than what you can think. And then you get the pictures and you see it and you're like, okay, but until you set foot in there, you really don't get an idea of the magnitude of the place. The place really has its own personality, its own being. And so, to have it where it was and to open that facility, I'm sure, I can't imagine anybody being more excited than the players making that transition, the fans making that transition, everybody, and nothing against Tulane Stadium.
No.
But to go from Tulane Stadium to a then and now a state-of-the-art facility that can be everything you need it to be had to be, in those days, one, almost unheard of, and two, pretty freaking phenomenal when you walk in there as a player.
Yeah, no doubt. And helps you from the elements, obviously, here in South Louisiana, the humidity and the heat and the rain and all that. But also, to your point, it then goes on to become an iconic building, not only in the city, but in the league. 11 Super Bowls being hosted in there. So, JD, it's kind of important. So let's go back and talk to members of the team, people that covered the team, on what that was like, that transition. Because look, as you mentioned, no offense to Tulane State, they'd hosted a Super Bowl. They'd had some big games. The Sugar Bowl was there. I mean, it's not like that venue wasn't special in Uptown New Orleans. But it kind of maybe goes to tell you maybe the need and the why and maybe the foresight as to why they built that new place.
Yeah, I mean, again, Dave Dixon and those guys had a vision that really was before. I mean, it was so far advanced that, I'm sure when they make the proposal, there are probably people looking at them like, what in the heck are you talking about? That can't be done. I'm sure it's something, because anytime you have something of that magnitude, there's going to be naysayers. And I'm sure somebody said, that can't be done. And they said, not only can it be done, but this is what it can be. This is how it can be done. And this is the uses that it'll be for. And I'm telling you, it's going to be perfect. And, you hear that and until it's built and you see it, I'm sure you got to have some skepticism.
Yeah. And it's crazy when you think it's 50 years, Final Fours, concerts, boxing matches, the Pope.
You name it.
I mean,
you name it, and it's been. I mean, you name it, and
it's been in there.
Yeah,
it's been in there.
Yeah, it's a significant place. Obviously, you don't have any NBA finals or anything like that. But I mean, if you're talking about,
you never know.
You're talking about football games and sporting events, and you're talking about iconic events, as you mentioned, the Pope and concerts, and even now, man, it's just phenomenal that building has sustained. And it's had to have some upgrades and some facelifts and that kind of thing, but still at base it's the Superdome, and it's going to be the Superdome.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So let's take a look back as to the first game in the Superdome preseason and the first regular season game as well. Mr. Danny Abramowicz, when I think of the New Orleans Saints, obviously you're one of the legends that helped kind of shape the early stages of the history of the black and gold. And obviously, as we celebrate 50 years of the Saints using the Superdome as its home, you kind of have to start before there was a Superdome. So much history and so much took place over in Tulane Stadium in Uptown New Orleans. You were part of some of those years there as well. When you look back at when football started in New Orleans and with the Saints when you joined the club, I guess what stands out to you?
Well, what stands out is, coming from Ohio down here to New Orleans was a rude awakening, completely different. And then playing at Xavier University, probably our big crowds at home might have been 8,000, 10,000. We might have played some other teams like Cincinnati or something, maybe at 35,000. But I can remember the opening kickoff. I was on the kickoff team, and 85,000 screaming people in Tulane Stadium. And then the kickoff, and John Gilliam ran it all the way back 94 yards for a touchdown. And there must have been, over the years, there must have been 10 million people at the game, because everyone tells me I was at the game.
Right.
So I just said, I got the key block that set John free to go for a touchdown.
There we go. Hey, memory's the way it always is, right? The stories get bigger and more people kind of get in there.
By those years, how would they know anyway? So it was a great experience.
That is very true, Danny. You don't have the days of social media as you have now, where everything is immediately put on video and people can share. But when you look back at the start of that, did you kind of think, and look, the NFL wasn't the way it is now, right, with being such a big part of this country, but I've always found it fascinating the relationship this organization has with its fan base. Did you kind of get that sense from the very beginning, playing at Tulane Stadium, eventually getting into the Dome as a broadcaster and coaching at Jesuit, that there's a certain connection with the Fleur-de-Lis and its fans?
Yeah, man, that was an expansion team. That was their first year, and coming down here, and I was a last round draft choice. Most people didn't think I was going to make it, but I did. So that was amazing. You start looking at those crowds at those games. It was unbelievable. And out in Tulane Stadium was out in the sunshine. I mean, hot as can be. Look at Tom Dempsey's kick. All those people, some of them were leaving the stadium, and they come back and party. Everything in New Orleans, as you know, is a party. Mm-hmm. So the party was on after that. But over the years, I adjusted. We raised our family here. It's been great to me, and I think over the years, I don't think. I've spent some time in Chicago, and I've spent my last year and a half in San Francisco on a team. Mm-hmm. I've never seen a fan base like this that was loved their team as much, and also that hung in there all these years through. When we first started off, back in those days, it was hard to build a team. You either had a lot of older guys who were good players at that time, Jimmy Taylor and Paul Hornung and those guys, but they were old guys. And then they had young guys like myself and some other. We didn't have middle of the road guys, so it was tough. We played hard, tried hard, but we just weren't good enough. And then as things changed, but over the years, I think that the Drew Brees era, when came along, plus the linebacking core that they had when Jim Moore was here, they had some tremendous teams. So a lot of history over the years, and Saints thank the Bensons for keeping the Saints here. They could have very easily moved it when John Meekum sold the team, but they stayed here, and the fan base has supported it all this time.
And no doubt, I guess when you look back from Tulane Stadium to now, 50 years inside the Caesars Superdome, it's crazy to think just all the different memories that happened, some good and some not so good, but still memorable moments there as well. When you look back at Tulane Stadium and your time there, what was something that I guess stood out that made it a home field for you? What was it? The weather? The fact that maybe not everywhere's as humid and hot and rainy?
Yeah. So one of the things is in New Orleans, when you come down here, it's going to be hot in September and stuff, but people didn't realize even in early December, it can be pretty hot. I can remember we played the Cleveland Browns, and those guys came down. It had been snowing up in Cleveland. They came down here, like they traveled on a Saturday, so went out on the field on Sunday. It was like 80 degrees. Mm-hmm. They had to pack a lot of those guys in ice. They weren't used to that. They didn't prepare for that. So the dome stadiums in a lot of places now make a difference because, like if you leave New Orleans and go up to Chicago and play in December, you better bring your fur coats with you. Going up there. So it's changed. The TV, the coverage, all that stuff. Back when we were preparing, as a coach, I mean, and a player back then, you look at just videotape. If the tape snapped, you had to re-splice it. Now it's all technology. You can press a button. If a guy's, I can remember one time I said, Coach, what about on third down? What did they do? Well, they had to go back and go search through the videos. As time went on, and I was coaching, someone said, Coach, what did they do on fourth down? You press a button, and all the fourth down plays come up. I mean, it had, technology has just changed the game and the preparation part of the game.
So you didn't get a chance to play in the Dome as a member of the New Orleans Saints, but obviously as it's getting built and it's being talked about that taking place, I got to imagine it had to be an unusual sort of conversation amongst players in the league, right? I mean, obviously it wasn't the only dome that was being built. You had the Silverdome, you had obviously the Astrodome all around in that time frame. But I guess from your perspective of having played in New Orleans when you were hearing that thing was being constructed and probably even seeing photos of it before you went in there as a broadcaster, I don't know, what was some of the thoughts that you remember from, like, does that thing go to work?
The thing I remember is how in the hell they built a building down there, a Dome Stadium down there. That neighborhood was downtrodden. I mean, it wasn't the greatest position, but as it started, it was just massive going on. And then one of the problems you have with the Dome Stadium, we played one of the first games, exhibition game with the Houston Oilers, and we went down there. Turf field, no one knew what a turf field was. We played on grass. So we went out there just our regular uniforms and no long sleeve shirts. After the game was over, plus they played baseball at that time at that stadium too. When we got in the shower room, our elbows and knees and stuff were just scraped up tremendously. They had a lot of problems with that. So, and plus it was hard on your legs because now they have so much cushion and so much things. And the size of the dome, when you go in there, it just feels funny. Back then, playing, I remember a lot of guys that say playing in a Dome Stadium. I remember the first time I played an exhibition game in a Dome Stadium. It was a weird feeling. And then doing the broadcast in there was it was a different thing. You had to just get used to it.
Yeah, no doubt. Speaking with Saints legend
Danny. I think the fans, another thing is, I think the fans had to get used to it. I think they liked it outside. And then, once they get used to the air conditioning stuff, I think they liked it a lot better.
No doubt. And the way that noise amplifies for sure, as we speak with Saints legend Danny Abramowicz. So what was it like to go back in there and now you're part of Saints radio and you're the color analyst there, you're part of the commentary and you're bringing that in and being in this venue?
I'll tell you, Wayne Mack and myself did the videos. I mean, the color for the radio. And that was a tough time. Hank Stram was there. And remember, Tampa Bay won their first game and everything, beat us down there. And I used to leave right after the 2-minute warning because I did the post-game show down in the locker room. And I knew when Tampa Bay was kicking New Orleans' butt, and that was their first win, I said, who are those guys going to feel like talking to me down there? And I said, I'm not going down there. The general manager said, you're going to go down there. We pay you and you go down there. So I said, okay. So I went down and I'm trying to figure out what can I do. So I went down in the locker room and I pulled the switch, pulled one of the wires out of the thing. And they would say, and the engineer was up in the booth with Wayne. Danny, are you there, Danny? I said, I didn't answer. By the time they got down there, because they couldn't do the post-game show, them guys didn't want to talk to me, and I know damn well that I didn't know what to ask them guys. I knew what they felt like, so we never did the post-game show after that. So, but it was fun doing it was fun, but it was very difficult because it was some, the play. I mean, the Saints were really going through a tough time at that period of time.
One of the things that John DeShazer has brought up during our series when we speak with former players here as well, and just the impact of that building having not just on the Saints was, as a high school student, that's a goal, right? I mean, obviously in the pros, you're thinking of the Super Bowl, you're thinking of what that would be like. But even when I was just a high school student at Brother Martin, Danny, the goal was to go to the Dome, to be able to play there and have the high school championships there. Having Coach Jesuit, obviously, you understand that, right?
We were one of the first teams. We were my first year with the Jesuit Blue Jays. They probably wonder why they hired this guy. We were 3-7. The second year, we were undefeated, 9-0, and Shaw High School was 9-0. And one of the alumni, Hank Kearney, was a coach there, and he had the home field advantage. And but one of the alumni from Jesuit says, "Hey, this game needs to be played in a dome." And he says, I'll pick up the tab, and you and Hank can split the gate. But I said, I got to check with Hank. So, of course, when I said, Hank, do you want to play? He had all these, a bunch of, about 8 or 9 guys were going to go big-time scholarships to college. He won't play me anywhere. So we played in the first play of the game. They fumbled. We got the ball and went down and scored, which was the worst mistake we ever made. They end up beating us 62-14. We had 25. There was 25,000 people in the dome for that. The kids were excited, but until after the game, we got it. But like I told them, I said, guys, most teams are home next weekend. We're still in the playoffs, and then we made it all the way to the state semifinals, and we played Catholic High, Baton Rouge, and they beat us. Warwick Dunn was our running back there. We couldn't stop. We played hard, but we just ran out of steam. It was a close game, but they were big. I'm glad we lost that game because the priest, Father Postel, said, sorry you guys lost. I said, no, don't be sorry, because they went, Catholic High went up and got beat 52-7. I think, forget, someone beat them in the final, so they had to beat us 150-7.
There you go. It's interesting you bring up Warwick Dunn. So many great players, right, that go on to the NFL, kind of go through those ranks there as well. It's got to be a pretty cool perspective from your point of, playing in New Orleans professionally, being a broadcaster, coaching at that high school level, and just seeing it full circle to where it is now. We are 50 years later, and anywhere you drive, to me, it's one of the most iconic buildings in the city. And to think of all the things that have taken place in there, all of the events, all of the players, all of the kids' lives, all of the parents, all the coaches that have had a little piece of history in that 50-year history.
Yeah, I think that coming in New Orleans and the dome, as soon as you pull into the city, you see the dome, and the dome had concerts, Mardi Gras, sporting events, boxing. I mean, everything you could think of. I think it's been a vehicle to raise funds for the community. I mean, plus, I think that New Orleans, people like to come here. It's a special place. You try to explain New Orleans to some people. I said, I can't explain it. You just got to come here. And when they come here, they love it. And it's just, to me, it's been great for the city, and I enjoy being a part of it.
Yeah, no doubt. Final thing for you, sir. Is there a moment or anything that kind of stands out to you? I know a lot of the conversations we've had obviously goes back to that dome reopening after Katrina. It goes from, games like winning the first playoff game, the NFC Championship game, the first game in the dome for a lot of others here as well. Is there anything that kind of stands out to your mind when you hear Caesar Superdome, you hear the current home of the Saints, that stands out?
Well, I think the winning the Super Bowl, when they won the Super Bowl and came back and played the first time, the storm hit, and this city was down on their knees praying, Lord, what can we do here? And that team came back and gave life, and the dome came back. So many people lost their lives in the dome, but they came back. In sports, sports can be a great thing. I hope they don't totally destroy sports. Some of the stuff that's happening with, especially in the college level and high school level, with imaging and all this kind of stuff, that people they're making it all a money deal. You got to make money, but this is going overboard. I think that what those guys did with the dome coming back and bringing life to the city, that's what sports is all about, and I hope we don't lose that.
No doubt. Saints legend Danny Abramowicz played at Tulane Stadium and came in, broadcasted, coached, was an offensive coordinator at the time during Ditka. You've seen a lot of different versions, or been in the dome in a lot of different scenarios and versions there as well. So who better to kind of just touch on a little bit of that history, Danny. So that's why we kind of wanted you on a little bit today.
Yep. I mean, my 3 years as a coaching offensive coordinator, we had 8 different starting quarterbacks. I said, if I give me Drew Brees and or Archie Manning or Peyton Manning, and I'm a genius. But those 3 years was pretty tough coaching.
Kind of hard to win when you don't have consistency there.
I love New Orleans. Do what?
No, it's kind of hard to win when you don't have consistency at that position, isn't it?
No, if you don't have that position, you're in trouble. You're seeing with a lot of these teams without the quarterback. You got to have the quarterback. But the quarterbacks, no, they're smart. They know you better have an offensive line in front of them, though.
No doubt. All right. Thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. God bless you.
All right. Joined now with Mr. Ken Trahan. I see the shirt on you, sir. So who better to talk about the Saints and starting in the Superdome as we celebrate 50 years than somebody that's in charge of the Saints Hall of Fame, which happens to be in the Superdome here as well. So it's interesting to look back at it. And when we say look back at it, Ken, we're looking back at it from the fact that you saw this building get constructed from campus, sir, because you were at Loyola.
That's right.
The time that the Saints decided to move from Uptown to downtown. Just kind of go back and remember what it was like, I guess, being a student, seeing Tulane Stadium and seeing all those things that had gone in there, Super Bowls, Sugar Bowls, all of that, first game there, to moving Uptown. I guess take us back. What was the discussion like? Why move? And what was it like to see the transition?
Well, the whole process was funny. First game in Tulane Stadium, September 17th, 1967 against the Rams. I'm sitting in the south end zone with my father and watching John Gilliam run the other way, 94 yards for a touchdown. And, of course, I'm 11 years old. I'm like, I think the Saints are going to win the Super Bowl. So, and ironically, as has been detailed on 1,000 occasions, also sitting in the south end zone with his father, as it turns out, only about 3 sections over, unbeknownst to us, was Ed Daniels with his father. So go figure. The ties were incredible. It's frightening. It's amazing, though. But if you believe in those things, which I do, I think if things are ordained, there's a reason for all that. But having said that, being at that point, and then, of course, seeing what transpired and the dome being approved, and then the groundbreaking, and then, of course, opening, on August 9th of 1975, play the Oilers in a preseason game there, lost 13-7, had over 72,000 people there. And, yeah, I was there, and I had just started at Loyola as a freshman, and my father had season tickets. We're original season ticket holders in Section 119. And, oh, by the way, I still have ticket stubs from then. And the Plaza Section 119 was $8.50.
$8.50.
So, yeah, there you go. So just to give you some perspective, soft drink was $1.50, beer was $3, although I wouldn't know about beer, right? So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course not. But having said that, yeah, it was the first game. It was the preseason game with the Oilers. They lost 13-7. Then the regular season game, the first one was like September 28th against the Bengals. They lost 21-0. Ken Anderson threw 3 touchdown passes. Isaac Curtis caught a couple. And Archie Manning and Bobby Scott both played equally in the game, and both were equally ineffective, and they didn't score a point. What was really interesting, though, and I think today's fans don't realize this because of the corporate input with ticket purchasing and with the fan support because the Saints actually had success, is the fact that for the first regular season game ever in the Dome, they had just over 52,000 people. It was nowhere near full. And that's when the building had first opened. But that was for a franchise at the time that hadn't won, and also at a time when the NFL wasn't quite what it is now.
Right.
And corporate in particular, because I think most people realize now that the annual sellouts are largely due to corporate purchases that take place, and that really wasn't the case back then. So I think that was what struck me more than anything else. Went to that preseason game. Man, this place is full. Look how beautiful this place is and everything else. And my eyes were completely fixed on the gondola. I mean, that's all I remember is looking up and seeing the gondola with those screens basically showing you what's going on in the field. I'm like, that was state of the art in those days.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right? And then the first regular season game, it struck me because I noticed immediately. Now I'm older. I'm a freshman in college, and it's like, man, there's a lot of empty seats here, right? And it struck me. I remember that very well. And, of course, the Saints had a terrible season. They went 2-12 and fired John North in midstream, and poor Ernie Hefferly had to step in and fill out the rest of the season. So it was an ignominious start to go into that new facility.
When you think of the building, it's interesting. We've been doing these series, and I was talking with John DeShays, who's helping me on this here as well, Ken, and I was like, I've lived here my entire life. I turned 50 in January, and I don't know a skyline that doesn't have that building in it. And when you think from, the winning and the losing and just the championships or all the different events that have taken place from boxing, the Pope, concerts, and obviously games and stuff, though. But when you look at what that building meant for the city and what it's meant since then and where it is now, it's pretty remarkable when you think about it, isn't it?
Well, it is. All of those things would not be part of this landscape. You can throw into that presidential conventions. I mean, everything has taken place in that building. The biggest concerts when they have the big ticket items. I mean, I've been to a whole bunch of those events. Mm-hmm. So without that building, we wouldn't have any of that. I'm sure of it. And when you think about the building itself, just by NFL standards, opening in 1975, credit to Mr. Curtis and the whole crew that came up with that concept to build it the way they did and what it is, the fact that structure is still there and functional and solid and is better than it's ever been is a testament to the original concept and what they designed and how they executed that. And, of course, after what happened in 2005, even more remarkable.
Right.
And we've seen the transitions. We've seen the renovations. Look, we all know there's an end game at some point, whether it's in our lifetime or not. At some point, there's going to be a new facility, okay? Or you won't have an NFL team. Now, when that is, I don't know. I think they just kicked the can down the road pretty well. Frankly, they did some really nice renovations. And it's a nice building. By NFL standards, it's not top shelf, but it's not bottom either.
Yeah.
It's a solid, good facility, which is why the league will consider strongly coming back here and staging another Super Bowl, aside from the fact that the city does such a great job with the event. And the geography makes sense, and getting around is so easy, and the entertainment and the culture is fantastic. And even crime is down in the city, everything imaginable. So it's a real plus. But again, it's all centered around what you mentioned. It's all centered around that building.
Yeah.
If you don't have that building, it's not even a discussion.
Right.
The first few Super Bowls were at Tulane Stadium. That place doesn't exist anymore. And there's no other place that could possibly conceive of hosting something of that magnitude. No other place. So, look, it's been that substantive. And on the other hand, the facility next door, needs a lot of work or needs a change in the near future in terms of the overall facility.
I think one of the things that also stands out to me is you think about it from Final Fours and all the different championships and college football championships. You have obviously what the NFL's been able to bring there with all the Super Bowls and hopefully another one coming up here soon. But it's just crazy to think that I guess a structure or a building can be attached to a place or a city like that. Like you and I love to travel and we love sports, right? But so a lot of times I'll fly over towns and you'll look at a building or a structure and it's kind of tied to it, right? I mean, the Dome really is that for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's totally identified. I mean, look, the major markets have multiple professional teams and in some cases more than one playing in the same facility, if it's New Jersey or Los Angeles or whatever the case may be. But they've got all the other sports entities as well and all the other facilities. When you think about the one-off, so to speak, or the dominant structure in a sport, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 locales. Certainly in basketball, Oklahoma City, that they live and die with that arena, which, by the way, is probably the only one that might be lesser than New Orleans, right? It's been there, done that. So, but they're so identifiable with that facility because that's their sport and that's everything. In baseball, certainly the Cardinals, I think about them because it's a baseball city.
Yeah,
I mean, 100%. Everything revolves around the baseball. They've got an entire village that exists there that's second to none, and they've created this genre. So when you think of that city, St. Louis, baseball, of course. When you think about New Orleans, without a doubt, it's the Superdome.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Louisiana Superdome or the Mercedes-Benz Superdome or the Caesars Superdome, it's the Superdome.
Yeah.
And that's the center of everything. It has been and will continue to be in the very near future.
And we kind of take it for granted now. When we think about it, even as training camp starts this week, as we're recording this, Ken, there's an air-conditioned facility or something from that nature, right? But as we know, just walking here, it's very humid in the summer. It's hot all the way till October. You get rain and stuff. Being able to have a facility that has all that, it had to really just strike people walking in that first season, that first game, that first preseason. Oh, there's AC, there's comfy seats. You could see everywhere the amount of people. Like, I don't know, it just had to be weird. I never got to go to Tulane Stadium, so just the change or the difference between the two.
Well, the one that's extremely obvious would be the climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I sat at Tulane Stadium for a Saints game against the St. Louis Cardinals in 1969, and in the third quarter it rained cats and dogs, and we got soaked. But we were loyal, and my dad wasn't leaving, so we just went underneath and waited in the stairwell, the walk-up ramps, and just sat there for a while. And then when we came back out and watched the fourth quarter, it's like 95 degrees, and it's so steamy that it was. You went from torrential rain to the hottest, most unbearable conditions. And even as a young person, I remember that vividly. And oh, by the way, they went on and lost the lead and lost the game in the fourth quarter, which made it worse. Clearly, that's number one. Number two, which I think a lot of people can appreciate now because they can relate it to Tulane athletics today, is parking.
Because, I was just going to say that. You imagine?
We did it. And my dad and Richie Boudreau, who had the season tickets together, who had New Orleans tuxedos and one of our best friends, Richie and my dad knew somebody on Audubon Place. So we used to go park in their driveway all the time. But if you didn't have that, I mean, it was search, catch as catch can.
It's like Mardi Gras.
Park and walk, and you don't know how far you're going to walk, and you don't know if your car's in a great place or anything else. But there was no parking. So you just had to live with that back in those days, too. And nowadays, nothing of the sort. You not only have the cavernous Superdome lot, but you have the Champion Square lot. You have the other parking garage adjacent to that as well on the other side of Club 44. So you got all this parking now.
Yeah.
And it's contained and it's safe. It costs you, but it's so much more convenient.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two things more than anything else, the elements, the climate, and the parking.
Right behind you, Ken, is a painting of the opening of Yeoman Stadium. And having worked in the Dome and then out of the Dome to being part of the Tulane broadcast, I'll never forget that opening game. I was like, is this what it was like back then? Because it was the hottest, most steamiest thing ever. And there's no way to. I mean, I was ducking by the wall just to find some shade in there. So I can only imagine what it was like. Look, one of the things I wanted to touch on, obviously being the curator and a guy that runs the Saints Hall of Fame there in the Dome. If I'm a Saints fan, is there still anything from that opening year or game or anything? Is it like
we're in the process
guide or anything?
We're in the process of relocating because of the renovations to the Dome, but so no museum presently. We're working on that diligently as we speak. But yeah, we've got, you name it, we've got it. We've got the Gilliam football, we've got the Dempsey shoe, we got the Dempsey ball. I mean, I could go on and on. We got Morton Anderson first kicking shoe. Got Morton Anderson's ball that he kicked the Saints into the playoffs on in 1990. And we got Archie's jersey from the beginning and all of this kind of stuff. So, yeah, from a historical perspective, it's pretty neat to have all of those elements. Of course, the history that was made by the Saints successfully all came later. But from the standpoint of history, another one, too, is Brian Milne's jersey, okay? That's one that's special because people, it's a discussion point. And it's always fun to tell people the story when they see that. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of great stuff like that.
That's fantastic because you went up and down the list basically of the 10 games that we picked, essentially. And we had Morton Anderson on, obviously the NFC Championship game, all those different Archie's time on there. So it is pretty cool. If you're a Saints fan, look, I didn't get to go see it, but to kind of go see all those little moments in there would be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. I do a presentation to the rookies every year through the organization here, and that presentation is to present to them the history of the franchise. That's what the coach and the owner and Freddie McAfee and Jay Romick and the whole bunch and Evan Myers, they really want these rookies to understand the history of the franchise and what's come before them and the significant players and how things happen and why they happened and when they happened and everything else. And it's always intriguing. And I'll tell you a really funny aside to that is, and really not funny, but I think it's telling. I always look for eye contact. I always look to see who's paying attention. I'm like a teacher in that particular moment.
Right.
And I swear, almost every year I've picked out that guy. I said, this guy's going to be a player. And I said, unless he's got limited ability, his focus is amazing, and he's on top of it. And interestingly enough, the last 2 years, up until the last 2 years, I was right every time for like 6 straight years. I can name all the guys that I picked out. One of them was Caden Ellis, and he was a 7th-round pick, and the guy turned out to be a good NFL player.
Yeah.
So Pete Werner was another. I could name them all, but Trey Hendrickson was another one of those. But most recently, the last 2 years, the 2 guys that were like that, Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck.
No kidding.
Back-to-back years. Not only full attention, but afterwards coming up to you, introducing themselves, shaking hands, and asking questions. So totally immersed in it. And to me, that speaks volumes about the individuals. If you're a teacher, you're in a classroom.
Sure.
You got 1/3 of the class is tuning you out. They have no interest. They're sleeping, whatever. The other half of the class might be somewhat engaged, but don't seem particularly interested. Then you got the ones that are keenly observant, taking notes about every single little detail, and then asking questions. Well, those are the ones that get my attention. I just named a few names for you.
Immersing themselves in the culture is part of that.
The history matters to a lot of those things. Look, that's one of the things I really appreciated about Sean Payton. And I'll always talk in positive fashion about him because what he gave this franchise and what he gave this city was remarkable. And it's something that we'll never forget. And it was consistent, too. But he had a tremendous sense of history, and he had a great affection for the former players in particular and treated them, I could tell a million stories about it, phenomenal fashion, and always wanted to connect with them. Look, he ramped up our golf tournament for the Hall of Fame by putting the organization all in back in 2006 with having his players there every year, himself, and so forth and so on. And that continues to this day. And Kellen was great this year. But Peyton, again, he got it. And he told the story, and this is the 22nd version. He's 11 years old. He's at a Philadelphia Eagles training camp practice, and he's standing behind a fence on the side. And he's trying to get people, the players, to pay attention to him, and nobody did, but one guy walked over to him. One guy signed an autograph with him, and they had a Kodak camera or whatever and took a picture with him. And so when he got to town, he asked me, how do I reach this guy? So I gave him his number and everything else. He reached out to him. They became friends. And even when the man was stricken and really couldn't recognize people or anything else, he went and saw him again. That was Tom Dempsey. And he became fast friends with him, all because of when he was 11 years old and the very fact that this guy paid attention to him. Sought him out when he first got here and found him. And then he did that with a lot of guys that played here previously, and I think they appreciated it deeply. Of course, he was responsible for all the pictures in the hallway, and then in the indoor facility as well. That lives on to this day with the indoor facility. So I think it's important to connect yourself to the past because whether they won or lost, those people are part of what you did. Which is exactly what we do with the Saints Hall of Fame.
That's what I was going to say. It's a great way to wrap up here is that connection, right? And look, we have great franchises throughout the NFL that have great fan bases, traditions from the Terrible Towels in Pittsburgh, what have you. But we always talk about that, whether it's in our industry in media or even obviously, as you mentioned with Sean Payton, understanding there's a certain connection here. And as we tie it in and close out, it goes back to that dome. That's our home. That's our place.
All of it.
And one of the things, obviously, it's number one on our list is the dome reopening. That moment, didn't it just signify it the most? I mean, what do you recall from that? Remember that? And we'll wrap up.
Well, the greatest was, of course, Hartley kicking it right through right down the middle to beat the Vikings. You can't top that in terms of a football moment, but the greatest moment in the history of the Superdome was the return on September 25th, 2006.
Of all of them.
There's no question. And I can tell you, sitting in the press box, the old press box, the real one on the third level, with not to mention the one that exists now, which I don't even want to talk about, it was unbelievable because I was watching what was going on in the pregame, and then I'm looking side by side to see people next to me, and I was not ashamed to admit that I had a tear in my eye.
No doubt.
And I looked around, and I saw that with a few other people. And everybody that went through something here, and I consider mine minor. We were out of our home for the better part of 14 months with damage from above and flooding out and so forth. But compared to others, what happened to me was very minor, and we were blessed and we had help and everything else. But to see so many people be brought back. It's the one uniting force in this community is the New Orleans Saints. It always has been, and it always will be. Doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, black or white, suburban or urban, makes no difference. Side by side, giving each other high fives, cheering like crazy during the game, and then you go your separate ways afterwards, and your lives are totally separate. And where do they congregate? Always at what is now the Caesars Superdome, where it happens, and the conditions are perfect, and the place is better, and it's easier to navigate. And I'm sorry about all the security you got to go through, but then again, that's a different animal than what we're talking about in 1975.
Yeah.
But then again, it's a different world too.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's the thing that always stands out to me. It's always remarkable. Nowhere else can we all get along. Doesn't matter if you're from Lakeview or what part of town you in, what's your bank account number, or what you drive. When you walk in on a Sunday, Monday, or now Thursday, Ken, sometimes Saturday in the NFL, they might even start playing on a Tuesday or Wednesday.
Oh, man.
Point is, when you get in that facility, in that place, it's an iconic building. It's a place where everybody gets together. And as you mentioned, we all become one. And it's crazy how that logo almost is right there with that flag that's blue and white and has the fleur-de-lis. That's a state flag, almost equated a lot of times to it. At least the people have made it that way.
Yep, we love the Saints. And anybody that doesn't understand that just because we're journalists covering a team per se, that we don't have a rooting interest, you're crazy. Everybody has a rooting interest. And of course we do. And when you're born and raised, it's not only in your blood, it's something that's ingrained in you when you're at the first game. And you've been part of the history. My wife danced for the Saints. We're original season ticket holders. My sister danced for the Saints. I did Saints broadcasts. I run the Saints Hall of Fame. I've covered the Saints. I could go on and on. So, you can't deny the affection and being involved in it and being totally engrossed in the entire scenario. We want them to succeed more than anybody possibly can. And that's a statement of fact. But if it's not going well, we'll say it's not going well, but it's never personal. Yeah. Never.
I almost equate it sometimes. It's almost like a family member.
I think
it's
that's
like
accurate.
family.
That's
you know what I'm saying? Like you can pick on your brother, you can give him some tough love sometimes, but you're always going to be you're always family. I almost feel like that's the case. There's some times that you're not happy.
No.
There's some times that you are.
Absolutely.
And you cry and you share the stories, man. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it, guys.
That was fun, kind of going back in time, JD, and looking back at all those different memories again. It's crazy to think 50 years in the books. Let's see what happens over the next couple of years here.
Yeah, 50 years in the books, 50 down and 50 to go. Let's see what happens because, again, the facility has withstood the test of time.
And it just got done, the latest renovations going into the start of last season.
Yeah.
And it looks completely beautiful. It is state-of-the-art, all those stuff. And all we need now is a little winning. Hang some more banners up there and have some fun there as well. John DeShazer, NewOrleansSaints.com. Gus Kattengell, thank you for taking a trip down memory lane with us. You've been listening to Home Sweet Home, a New Orleans Saints podcast presented by Caesars New Orleans. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Home Sweet Home, a New Orleans Saints podcast presented by Caesars New Orleans.
Favre sprints to his right, throws back across the middle, and he's intercepted. Porter.
For the latest on the black and gold, check out NewOrleansSaints.com. And be sure to check out the New Orleans Saints podcast for the latest news from your favorite team.
Will he get it here? Yes! Touchdown pass, 5-4-0 in the 504.
We'll catch you next time on Home Sweet Home.